Hi everybody, it's Ms. Namart again, and today I'm going to teach you how to make gnocchi. There are a few different types of gnocchi. We're going to make a potato gnocchi, but you can also make it with ricotta, semolina, and then there's a Parisian gnocchi that is similar to choux pastry. I picked gnocchi because it just has a handful of ingredients that you may have around the house, and it's actually super fast to put together. The first thing that I did, and I did this already, is I took a medium russet potato and I peeled it and I boiled it until it was soft, and you can tell it's soft if you take a paring knife and insert it in the potato, and if it comes out smooth, it's good. I took the potatoes out with a slotted spoon, and then right behind me that you can't see, I've got the water still sitting in a pot because we're going to be cooking our gnocchi. So rather than dumping out the water and starting new, I just took it out with a slotted spoon. So what I'm going to do is put my potatoes in my pot, and I'm going to take a masher and I'm going to mash my potatoes. You want to make sure that you let your potatoes cool slightly, because the next thing that we're going to add is an egg, and if the potatoes are hot, then it's going to cook the egg, and that's not going to be good. Okay. And you want to make sure that there's no large chunks of potatoes. If you've got something really fancy called a ricer, then you could use that, but I've got a masher, so that's what I'm doing. So here are my mashed potatoes. To it, I'm going to add an egg. Going to crack it into a bowl that you can't quite see here, and then of course wash my hands because I touched the raw egg. And I'm going to add the egg into my potatoes along with about half a teaspoon of salt and a quarter of a teaspoon of pepper. But don't worry, I will have the ingredients on the bottom of the recipe. I'll have the ingredients for you so that you're set and ready to go. And then I'm just going to mix all of that together. So it's going to look like a really, almost like a cake batter. To this, I'm going to add a cup of flour. I'm going to leave just a little bit behind. There we go. And then I have 2 teaspoons of butter that I'm just going to break up a little bit and put in here just because it makes it easier to mix in. So I just sort of break it up with my fingers and add it into my recipe. I think I'm going to put this. Okay. So now I've got the flour in here, and I'm very carefully going to mix this together until you get a dough. And at first it's going to look like this. It's going to look really shaggy and nothing's together, and you're going to think that you've ruined it. But if you just mix it a little bit longer, it will all come together. There we go. Mine's almost there. There we go. And so now I've got a dough. So now I'm going to make my gnocchi. And there are two pieces of equipment that you can use to make your gnocchi. I have a gnocchi board. It looks like this. If you don't have a gnocchi board, you can use a fork. That works just as well too. So I'm going to take just a part of my dough, like a quarter of my dough at a time. Okay. And you don't have to worry about measuring. Make an educated guess of a quarter of your dough. And if your dough's a little sticky, that's why I held on to a little bit of flour. You can use just some extra flour. Place it on the counter. And you're going to channel your childhood. If you remember working with Play-Doh or plasticine and making snakes, so I just kind of either roll it between my hands or roll it on the board, and I want to get it about an inch in thickness. And if you're not sure what an inch in thickness is, for many people the distance between their knuckles is about an inch. So if you kind of hold it up to around your finger, then you know you've got it at about the right thickness. There we go. And then once I've got that, I'm going to take a paring knife, because it's nice and simple, and I'm going to cut them into gnocchi that are about an inch in thickness. Now technically you can keep them just like this and you've got gnocchi, but the cool part is the ridges of gnocchi. So if I use a gnocchi board, if you ever want to get one, you can buy these at any specialty cooking store. The ones at school we bought online, they're like no more than $10. They're usually about $5 or $6. So I have the ridges here, and all I do is roll down, and you can see that I've got a rounded shape, and then I don't know if you can see the actual ridges. Like so. And if you don't have one, you can use a fork. So you're going to take the fork down, not up like we were eating, and just roll this down the back of your fork, and that works too. Now the nice thing about gnocchi is you can freeze them just like this. So what I would do is just put them on a baking sheet. That's why I have the baking sheet here. And I can put them in the freezer until they're frozen for a few minutes. Or sorry, I'm going to put them in the freezer until they're frozen. And then I'm going to put them in a bag, and then I can cook them. So the second part that I'll show you in just a moment is how you cook your gnocchi. Okay, we're back. At this point I have made the gnocchi, and now I'm going to show you how to cook them. We're going to take the water that we had used to cook the potatoes, and I'm going to bring it back up to a boil. But it's really quick to cook gnocchi, so I figured I'd also show you how to make a brown butter sauce that you may want to go with it. So in a pan I've got about 1 to 2 tablespoons of butter, and what I'm going to do is melt my butter and then from there make browned butter. So the butter that we have comes from cows, and it's a combination of milk with some water. And when you melt your butter, what's going to happen is the butter is going to start to get all foamy, and then you're going to start to see it separated into its two layers. You've got the milk solids and the butter fat. And if you were to remove the milk solids and take just the butter fat, you would have clarified butter, or ghee as it's known in Southeast Asia. And you can get ghee in any specialty Asian or any specialty Indian store. Big vats of ghee. We're going to go beyond that, and we're going to take those brown butter salt, or try that again. We're going to go beyond that, and we're going to get the milk solids to actually start to brown. Not burn, but brown. And what's going to happen when it gets brown is it starts to get some toasty notes, and it's going to just add a little bit of extra interesting flavor. You can also add brown butter to a bunch of other things. So for example, I made carrot cake the other day, and I used brown butter in place of some of my oil, and I also used some whole wheat flour, so I can pretend that it's a little healthier. Haha. Sometimes when I make cookies, I make brown butter cookies, and so I take the butter that was supposed to be in the cookies and I brown the butter. So I don't know if you can hear right now, but the butter is melting and starting to sizzle, and if I kind of tilt it that way, you see the sort of white milk solids. And what's going to happen is that bubbling is going to subside in a few minutes, not even a few minutes, probably a minute or so, and you're going to start to see some little brown bits. And the minute you start to see brown bits, you technically have brown butter, and it's done. What I would also do to this is, once my brown butter is set, I might add some, for example, sage would be really good. Sage and brown butter is a classic combination. You could add other herbs to it. Here we go. And It's almost ready, and what's going to happen is the butter itself is going to go from that light yellow that we associate with butter to something that's a little bit darker brown. Okay? And I can start to see from my end, I don't know if you can see from your end, that this is definitely getting toasty, and I've got some sort of little brown spots in here, so my brown butter is done. So what I'm going to do is take this off the heat. I'm going to very carefully slide over my water and bring it back up to a boil. That way you can sort of see everything happening in one go. So my water should come to a boil in just a second, and I don't need to add any salt to it because I'd already added salt when I cooked my potatoes. Okay? And so when you add your gnocchi, you want to add it one at a time, and you don't want to stand here and drop it in. You actually want to place it fairly close to the water. And if you think about when you're going in a pool, right? If you lower yourself in the pool, you're not going to splash. But if you stand and jump from a diving board, then yes, you are going to splash. So it may seem scary to place it really close to the water level. You're actually not going to splash yourself. If I dropped even from this height, yep, that's when I'm going to splash myself. Okay. So you're not going to put in all the gnocchi at once. So for example, this was just one log that I did, one of the rolls. So just that, because the more it gets crowded in the pan, the more likely it's going to boil over. And how do you know that your gnocchi's cooked? You're going to keep an eye on it, and when it starts to rise to the surface, then you know that your gnocchi's cooked. Fresh gnocchi that we just made like this is probably going to take 1 to 2 minutes. And then if you were to use your frozen gnocchi, that's obviously going to take a little bit longer. So there's just that moment of waiting until it has risen, and then you know your gnocchi is cooked. So it's a really simple recipe. In fact, if you were making something like ricotta gnocchi that uses ricotta cheese instead of potatoes, the time it takes for you to boil your water to cook your gnocchi, you could actually get your gnocchi together. So it is a really fast weeknight meal, honestly, or even weekend meal. The part that takes the longest is waiting for your potatoes to cook. So the smaller you cut your potatoes, the faster they will cook. So I took my potato, cut it into 4, that took about 15 minutes. If you cut your potato into 6 or 8 pieces, that's probably going to take you about 10 minutes. So I don't know if you can see here, but my gnocchi have all risen to the top. So again, I'm going to take my slotted spoon that I'd used for my potatoes. I've washed it. And I just carefully drain out the water. And then I'm going to add it, right, to my brown butter. And because that butter is still hot, it's sizzling. So we're basically almost done now. This is here, it's sizzling away. I'm just going to put it in a bowl, and then I might garnish that with a little bit of Parmesan cheese or parsley or sage or some other spice. Blue cheese would be really good too. But this is how you make gnocchi, and this is how you cook it, and you can put it in a brown butter sauce and impress people, because if you say it's in a brown butter sauce, they're going to think that that's pretty fancy. So hopefully you enjoyed this recipe, and if you choose to make it, please remember to send me photos because I would love to see them. Thanks so much.